Welcome to our update for the corporate Schuldschein market together with my colleague Maurice Gutermann. Maurice is in our DCM team responsible for our international clients. Good to have you today.
Glad to be here. Good to see you, Marcel.
Thank you. So the header of our presentation or our update is all's well that ends well. I think that sums it up quite well quite good for 2021. But maybe you can give us a short recap of the last year from your perspective.
Yes, thank you, Marcel, for this question. And actually, I'm glad I can use Gertrude's metaphor. We had a bit of an all-inclusive year last year. It started out with a bang, with a €1 billion euro transaction out of Austria. But then it kind of slowed down and petered out toward the middle of the year. We thought maybe this market isn't going to perform as we would like to because of the excess liquidity with a lot of companies. But the latter half of the year was a whole different story. In fact, Q4 all by itself was the strongest Q4, I think, ever. It was at least 20% over last year, which was strong already. There was something close to 50 transactions. So we're thinking right now that this is spilling over into 2022, and this is a very good ending to the year. As you mentioned, all's well that ends well. Maybe I can mention a couple of highlights. For example, total issuance, I think, was about 19 billion. So we're close to the 20 billion. By some measures, we're over it. That is kind of an important benchmark. Then we saw, for the first time in years, as far as I can remember, the return of a few US dollar issues, which Helaba, I think, exclusively led, which was a great addition to the market. We were hoping there'd be a lot more in the future. And also a little bit of a warning sign. It was almost exclusively unrated issuers, sort of the typical Mittelstand, as we say in German, and the rated issuers stayed away because of obvious reasons, the performance of the bond markets and the support packages that were implemented over the last 2 years. So good and bad, all inclusive, but I think with a very good ending towards the end of the year.
Yeah, that's... So you already mentioned that we saw almost exclusively unrated issuers in the market, and we also saw smaller sized issuances than compared to the years before. Again, what's the reason behind that?
Well, the smaller sized issues are really typical of the fact that the non-rated issuers, especially the medium-sized companies, are dominating the market. The large transactions, such as rated companies, we had a 2 billion transaction by Robert Bosch in 2020. One of those didn't happen quite this year. In fact, I have a little bit of a list. The largest transactions were the 1 billion by Mayr-Melnhof. Then there were 2 700 million transactions by Faurecia, led by Helaba, Traton, the VW subsidiary, and a 750 million deal by United Internet. That is actually sizable, but small pickings compared to previous years when we had much larger. So that accounts for the smaller size deals, and the unrated issuers was something like 86% of the market. So there's a lot of room to recover there.
Yeah, okay. Another topic I want to talk about is COVID-19. COVID-19 still affects all of our lives. And we definitely saw some effects on primary markets in 2020. How is it at the moment? Do we still see some negative effects due to COVID-19 in the markets?
Well, we're obviously not out of the crisis, as we just heard. COVID, I think, is sort of hanging above us all, but we've learned to live with it, and it affects us in many ways that we don't even realize, especially in the markets. Just coming back to that, what happened in 2020 was the Schuldschein market in particular retrenched to let's say, traditional values, with the focus on Germany, with international issuers staying away. This has much changed in 2021. So I think that we're almost back to normal, but we're observing trends that we wouldn't have accounted for previously. For example, corporates are sitting on excess cash. They're actually paying back their existing liabilities, such as Schuldschein and bonds. On the other hand, we've had a surge in confidence since the middle of last year, which really makes companies look outward toward more acquisitions. And this has this also raised demand, as we saw in Q4 with the fireworks display in the Schuldschein market. So those are pulling a little bit in different directions, but I think the normality is once again beginning to dominate with regular company M&A activity to be financed, hopefully through Schuldschein even more.
Okay, nice. So another hot topic is definitely ESG, and we at Helaba just closed 2 transactions. The first 2 social corporate Schuldschein transactions in the market, and you originated one of the transactions, and maybe you can give us a short presentation of the 2 transactions, or maybe the one you originated.
Indeed, yes. And let me just mention ESG is, as everybody knows, environmental, social, and governance. But until now, we've mostly focused on the environmental green part of it. Now, the other 2 letters are coming into their own, social and governance, and especially social was kind of absent from the market, at least from the Schuldschein market. And it's really very valuable to have a determined treasurer, such as our partner at Medicover, to really focus on that aspect. And let me just explain. Medicover is a Swedish-based company, but they're mostly active in Eastern Europe, meaning that they found underserved areas for medical services because of the local, let's say, problems that they have. So they've expanded rapidly. And they perform not just a business function, if you like, to paying patients and customers, but also for refugees and for other underprivileged groups. So this was a kind of an easy step to take to have the first social Schuldschein to be issued by a healthcare company. And we are very happy to have been part of that.
Yeah, it was a very nice transaction, that one. And coming back to the social and the green issuances, what do you think? Do you think we will see a lot more social SSD besides the green SSD in the near future? And is this type of instrument interesting for a certain kind of issuers?
I think that's a resounding yes, because we will see a lot more of that. In fact, not to put a fine point on it, but basically now you have to sort of explain why an issue is not somehow covered by ESG than the other way around. It used to be the exception, now it's becoming the norm. And as I mentioned, ESG, those are 3 different things that work together in conjunction. We've had this for social Schuldschein. We also saw a hybrid environmental and social Schuldschein by a German issuer, Nassauische Heimstätte, because they built buildings with smaller environmental impact and also for housing of certain groups. So basically, we haven't seen the full potential of ESG yet. And Q4, as I mentioned, was a fireworks display, but also the first time that we had all variants of ESG at the same time in the market. And those, just very quickly, green, social, the hybrid of green and social, KPI linked and rating linked. Those are the options that companies at the moment have, and maybe there'll be a lot more adding to that. It's a very broad-based spectrum that we're addressing with that, and we have a specialist group since recently that is very hard at work with advisory projects. This is definitely here to stay.
Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting topic, and I'm looking forward to see the development in the market, not only in the Schuldschein market, but also in the loan market and in the bond market. Mentioning the bond market, it's if we are talking about the corporate Schuldschein market, it's always obvious to also have a look at the corporate bond market and what happened there in 2021 and at the beginning of 2022.
Yes, thanks for that question, because the corporate bond market, while separate from the Schuldschein market, there's a lot of interaction, especially in terms of pricing, in terms of distribution. So the bond market performed exceptionally well in 2021. It wasn't quite the artificially inflated market by liquidity-seeking companies in 2020. Those were different times, if you like. So we've had in our observable universe, investment grade euro was something like 400 billion in terms terms of issuance, which is a very strong performance by the bond market. Also there were fewer really jumbo-sized deals, let's say 1.5 billion and over, which sort of suggests a similar development as in the much smaller Schuldschein market. But also there, similarly, ESG is on the rise. I think in terms of volume, it's about 25%, at least between 20 and 25%, and rising. So even if an issue is not explicitly ESG, it will be investors who will be asking pointed questions to issuers about their own policies, even if it's not in that particular issuance. So very similar tracks there. And worth mentioning also that hybrid bonds were on the rise with something like 10% of total issuance. So, and just the last point on this, we at Helaba, of course, we're focused on the Schuldschein, but we, I think, had a very good performance in the bond markets as well. Some of our, the issues that we led, somewhat confusingly, I think EWE, EW, RWE were very well placed in the German energy market, Brenntag chemicals. So for us as well, a very strong performance.
Yeah, definitely. I just have to smile about the EEW, whatever it was. I can't repeat it. So my last question for you today, after we go into another Q&A session, what do you expect for the corporate Schuldschein market in 2022? How did the market start, and is there maybe already a pipeline building up?
Yes, that is what everybody's focused on. It's on everybody's mind. I mentioned up front, somewhat optimistically, that the strong performance in Q4 was carrying over in 2022. I think this is the case because the year started with a large issue or deal marketed by a real estate company, Vonovia, at 500 million. I think right now there are 7 or 8 deals in the market. Helaba is out with our one of our first deals. So basically we're picking up where we left off last year. But as Gertrud mentioned, there is a lot of uncertainty, the volatility. These are the questions. This was the focus also on the questions that we received. So confidence is a fragile thing. Volatility can work against that. I think that might be exaggerated, but we'll know more as the year progresses. But right now, barring event risk, I think this is a fantastic time still for issuers and investors alike.
Okay. Thank you very much, Maurice. I do not have any further questions at the moment, but I'm happy and I will directly jump into our Q&A session. You already know it from the presentation of Ms. Traut. You can use your chat functionality. It should be on your right-hand side of the webinar tool. And just type in your question. We are here. We are happy to receive them. And yeah, there is also already the first question. When do you expect SSD spreads go higher, and when do you expect big corporates will be more in the SSD market? That's an interesting question, especially the last one, because we had some interesting developments in the interest rates during the last, let's say, couple of weeks, which is I think a relevant factor.
Indeed, yes, that's a very interesting question. I wish I had my crystal ball here today, but unfortunately I have to guess a little bit, but an educated guess. I think one particularity about the Schuldschein market is that there is a built-in inertia, so that we're not as driven by events and by changes in interest rates as, let's say, the bond markets, which react immediately. So there is a built-in time lag, even to very strong crises, as we saw in 2007 and 2008 in the Schuldschein. So we're going to be well supported, let's say, for the upcoming months, and maybe even for the whole year, even if things don't work out as we are optimistically hoping now. So in terms of the larger issuers, well, those will be the externally rated issuers that we mentioned, and that they found better pickings in the bond market. They will be returning because we can see it now, and we can prove it with charts, if you like, that prices have more or less converged. right now. And we used to enjoy for many years a slight pricing advantage in the Schuldschein. I think this will be coming up again. So I would fully expect that rated issuers, larger companies, return to the Schuldschein market just to supplement their total issuance and to diversify.
Yeah, definitely. So the next question is, so I skipped the first part, which is a nice introduction. Thank you very much for that one. Do you think ESG structure can take up at least half of the corporate SSD market, like in Europe corporate loans?
Yes, I think that's a question from Jackie from Bloomberg. Very nice to hear from her. Yes, we think so. We mentioned already that ESG is not just here to stay, but probably the default element in all kinds of issuance. There is so much innovation going on that it will be more or less a shame not to make use of that. And we've seen companies across the spectrum, some that are not obviously environmentally specific, but there's a lot of potential given the UN support, the EU taxonomy for most companies to find a niche in that range of ES and G. So 50% is, I think, a very careful estimate. I think we'll be looking at over that.
Yeah, definitely. I think so too. Yeah. So maybe the last question for today, as we're running out of time. So do you expect that companies will refinance maturities earlier because of expected increasing rates?
I don't, well, I'm trying to address it directly. Yes, I think it would be a careful answer. We're already seeing it. We're already seeing much interest in maturities coming up and sort of early refinancing projects. So I would say that companies are well aware of the risks involved of rising interest rates, and that could be another supportive and in fact dominating factor in the next few months. But still early days in 2022, but it did show up in the latter half of last year.
So again, we are running out of time, but don't hesitate if you have any further questions to ask them via mail. We will be there for you. We will be happy to receive your questions and definitely answer them. So thank you very much, Maurice, for your time. It was a very interesting discussion. And I'd like to thank all the audience for your time today and being with us. And I wish you all the best for 2022 and stay safe.